But Blair and Bush had created this horror doctrine of their terms humanitarian moral intervention. I call it Western interference and imperialism, because that is in reality what it is. And they dragged us into this war in Iraq that has cost the lives of, let's be conservative about it, at least 500,000 people, probably much more than that. And they dragged us into the war in Afghanistan, which is now spreading over into Pakistan. And that, unfortunately, is where Barack Obama seems to believe the future lies in prosecuting the war in Afghanistan in order to bring about peace and justice in the world. I have to say that the war in Afghanistan will merely create more wars throughout the whole region, more wars throughout the world, and more rearmament. Additionally, the US policy of national missile defence and the idiotic decision of the British government to provide listening posts for it in this country will be, I believe, the precursor for a new arms race between Russia and the West. These are very, very dangerous times. But we're in a media-dominated age. The biggest death toll anywhere in the world from wars is not Afghanistan, is not Iraq, is not Colombia, is actually the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where 5 million people have died in the past 10 years, in a war that is essentially a war about stealing the riches of the Congo. Mining companies, arms dealers, and many others are making huge amounts of money out of the Congo, and there's something surreal about visiting Goma, seeing tens of thousands of victims of torture and rape living in refugee camps, people sleeping on the streets, people living in incredible danger and starving in an area that's the most fertile in the world, and at the same time multi-billionaires sucking out diamonds, gold, coltan, tin and every other mineral that the Congo has to offer. There is a horrific agenda of instability that benefits the mining interests that carries on within the Congo. And that is an area that we have to have solidarity with and concentrate on. It's easy to be depressed. It's easy to say there are all these problems around the world and there is no alternative. There are alternatives. There is a great deal of hope. There is a great deal that we're very proud of. Remember February the 15th, 2003. Not just the massive demonstration that took place in London, historically the biggest ever in the history of this country, but those that took place in 600 cities on every continent of this planet that day against the war. And whilst we didn't stop the war in Iraq, I believe we stopped the invasion of Iran because of the size of our opposition to it. And we built a sense of unity around the world against the horrors of this war. Likewise, following the collapse of the Soviet Union, the breakup of the Soviet bloc, there was a period of completely untrammeled power by the United States, the unipolar world and all that went with that in economic and military thinking. Things have changed. The development of the World Social Forum, Porto Alegre, Mumbai, and all the conferences that have been held by the World Social Forum have shown it is possible for radical and left organisations in Western, industrialised capitalist economies to come together with landless people, with movements for social justice in very poor countries around the world to try to bring about a sense of international justice and international solidarity. And when I hear lectures, as one often does, about the failure of various economies in the poorer parts of the world to conquer this and conquer that, and how they're not following the Western agenda properly, I then look to the successes that are now being achieved in Latin America, particularly in Bolivia and Venezuela. They're doing far more to conquer poverty than all the economists put together, delivered by the IMF and the World Bank, have ever done. Because it's an agenda of redistribution of wealth, it's an agenda of the redistribution of power, and I think these things are very important. We have to be practical also. And this means international solidarity at the workplace level, at the company level, at the economic level. And the practical solidarity done by trade unions is very important and something that we can all participate in on a day-to-day basis. I've always been very impressed by the way in which the NUJ, National Union of Journalists, has done so much to help sisters and brothers in other parts of the world where journalists are routinely murdered, assassinated. Colombia, Palestine, many places around the world. And it was with great honour that I saw the way in which an NUJ message was received at a demonstration of Palestinian journalist after one of their number had been assassinated by Israeli occupying forces. That is practical solidarity that they're able to bring about. The same can be done in other unions and with the economic issues we're facing. So when companies, General Motors and all the others, try to close down one plant after the other on the basis that this plant is losing more money than that plant and setting one off against the other, that is the time not to join in that debate and that argument, but to join with the workers in the other plants to defend the jobs of everybody, irrespective of whichever country they happen to be in. Nationalism is the enemy of international solidarity, and we have to try to ensure that message gets across as far as we are able to. Think back over the past year of the important solidarity actions taken by trade unionists. The western states in the United States, the longshoremen, California, mounting a strike in opposition to the Iraq war. Such a strike would actually be illegal in this country. They managed to mount a strike in opposition to the occupation of Iraq and have a history of the most fantastic solidarity of people all around the world. The South African dock workers, that did far more than any UN resolution has done. When there was an attempted arms shipment into Zimbabwe, they simply said, we're not unloading, it ain't going. They stopped it. That is practical solidarity by trade unionists around the world. So the final points I want to make are this. The denial of human rights around the world is an appalling thing. And this country is very good at lecturing about human rights. Yet, in immigration law, there is almost permanent detention of some people, including children, in detention centres around this country. I've just come from a session of Student Action for Refugees. Great organisation, great people, practically giving solidarity to asylum seekers in various university towns. We are in no position to lecture other countries about human rights abuses when we routinely imprison asylum seekers and their children in detention centres in this country. More recently, we had the debate about the change in the counter-terrorism legislation, which would have included 42 days detention without charge or trial in this country. A wholly arbitrary day, wholly arbitrary number of days that was chosen. An appalling piece of legislation. But if we pass that kind of law in this country, who are we to complain about counter-terrorism law in other countries around the world when they imprison people for whatever period it's about? If we believe in innocence until proven guilty, if we believe in an independent judicial system, then we should practice it and ensure a Labour government practices it as well. How many of those ministers made their careers out of NCCL and Liberty and all the human rights organisations only to trample all over them when they had the opportunity to do the opposite? So in this session, we're about international solidarity. For peace, for justice, for the end to poverty, for the end to hunger, for the end to homelessness, and for decency in the treatment of peoples around the world. We're dominated by a media age which tells us that problems and disasters only exist in industrial countries. They don't. That immigration is a problem that has to be dealt with by the rich countries in the world. Immigration is a disaster for many people in the poorest countries in the world. How many hundreds have died this year alone trying to get from Senegal to the Canary Islands to seek a place where they can at least live? How many have died trying to cross the Mediterranean to get to Malta or Italy? This is murder on a grand scale by wealthy countries denying safety and justice for people coming from poorer societies. If socialism means anything, it means internationalism. If socialism means anything, it means human rights. It means human justice. It means the right to live. It means the right to eat. It means the right to work. It does not mean the denial of those rights either in our society or in any other society. Reach out to those around the world. Reach out to those that think the way we do. Reach out to those in the peace movement. Stop the waste on arms expenditure. Stop the waste on nuclear weapons. Stop the waste of resources and instead transfer that skill, that brilliance and that energy into solving the world's medical, sanitary, health, environmental and social problems. That's what internationalism is really about. Thank you very much.